All right, guys. Thanks for coming back to the Student and the Teacher podcast on the Green Room. If you haven't already, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, check out episode 0, episode 1, and episode 2. Episode 0 was just me and Josh talking about our whole vision for this thing as we went along. Episode 1 was Pastor Jason Wilson from Rejuvenate Church in Anderson. That one was awesome. And episode 2 was Josh's sister, Vanessa Lyons. Right. And that one was awesome as well. So today, we've got an awesome guest, and we're going to jump right into it. Y'all already know my whole spiel. But today at Combo, we just got done. You talked a lot about unity. And the thing that stuck with me was you talked about having unity with Christ before having unity with people. And that comes from a verse, I think it's Matthew 22 or something like that, one of those verses. It's actually the verse that my home church is based off of. And we paraphrase it, the verses into love God, love people. Which I know a lot of churches do that. I feel like we did it first. Yeah. But just to expand on that, that's something that we don't talk about a lot, especially in our world today. We want to jump straight into unity, especially in the time, like right now in the present. Yeah. But we skip that part about being unified with God in a relationship.
Yeah, I think that, there are a couple of verses in Romans that actually talk about the reality that before we can have true peace and reconciliation with the outside world, that true peace and reconciliation really come first from reconciliation with God, and then after that we can have reconciliation with other people. And so I think that's what, like, everybody in our world is looking for peace. Right. We're all looking for this unity and reconciliation, and I think we're looking for it in an outward sense. But I think in a lot of ways we got to focus upward and inward before we can ever get to outward. And I think that's the piece that's missing for a lot of people, right? I think they want to do all of this. The reality is, if you don't have that reconciliation with God first, what you can do outwardly is limited. If you have that reconciliation with God, He gives you everything you need in order for reconciliation outwardly happen. We're doing a Bible reading plan, and I just read the feeding of the 5,000, and that's one of the things that I love in that story, is that the Jesus looks at the disciples and said, "Hey." They're like, "Hey, these people are hungry. We need to send them away." And Jesus looks at them and says, "No, you feed them." Right. And the disciples I imagine they're probably freaking out. They're like, "How are we going to feed all these people? We don't have enough money. We don't have any food." Right. And Jesus says, "Find what you do have." They went. This little boy gives them food. They give it to Jesus, and then Jesus gives it back to them to go and feed the people. And I think the reality is, we've got to live this way. Jesus gives us an assignment, right? As believers, our assignment is to be His ambassadors. And to reconcile with other people, and He gives us everything we need. But the only way He does that is if we reconcile with Him first. And so I think I think it matters. I think it's the most important aspect of that.
Good. You just talked about the inward outward piece, and it made me think about where we are as a church. That we have a lot of churches struggling with the inner reach piece. And I believe that because we've struggled with the inner reach piece, we've struggled on the outreach piece. You go to what I call a well-oiled machine in New Spring Church. I believe that you guys are doing things right. Just tell me and tell those guys that are out there listening some of the ways that you guys have been effective in reach in order to do a great job on outreach, because I honestly believe that when we take care of the inside, that we can take care of the outside. That's why you guys are making a major impact outside of the four walls of the church. Can you just elaborate, speak on that a little bit for me?
Yeah, at the Greenwood campus, one of the things that we say, I feel like God gave me this vision about 3 years ago. In Matthew, Jesus talks about the fact that believers are supposed to be a city on a hill. Right. And I went to Israel one time, and I saw the ancient city of Masada. It's a city that's on top of a hill in the middle of a desert, and you see the walls that are around Masada. And I had this thought, like, in order to be a city on a hill, like a city on a hill, it's on top of a hill. And that hill has to be solid. It has to be a solid foundation. If it's not, then the city's going to fall right through. Right? So in order to be a city on a hill, first you have to have a solid foundation. And so that solid foundation is our relationship with Jesus, right? The hearing and doing of the Word of God. That's what He says, in Matthew 7. Our foundation has to be that. And then secondly, I think if you want to be a great city on a hill, before you can ever worry about what's happening outside of the city walls, you have to take care of the people that are inside of the city walls.
Right.
Right? Like as a shepherd, that's what you got to take care of your sheep, the people that God puts under your care. And so that's what we talk about a lot is we have to take care of the people that God brings to us first. That is our primary responsibility. And we do that through making sure that our people are reading their Bible, making sure that they're getting in community with other people who are reading their Bible, and making sure that we are caring for them in smaller groups of people. Because what happens, I think, is that if you take care of the people inside the walls, naturally people outside of the walls are going to be drawn in to what you're doing. Like I think about that idea of a city on a hill, and somebody who's outside the walls in the desert, right? I mean, it's dark, it's dry, it's hot. But all of a sudden they see this city on a hill and they see light and they hear voices and they hear singing and they hear laughter. You know what's going to happen? They're going to be drawn into where that city is, and they're going to try to get there. And so if you take care of the people inside the walls, they're going to be singing with joy and laughter, and they're going to be light, and people are going to see that, and people are going to be drawn to it. There was a Pastor Larry Osborne. He's a pastor of a church in California, and he said one time, I've been the pastor of this church for 11 years, and never once have I ever stood on stage and told our people to invite anybody. He said, because you don't, a manager at a restaurant, you don't see them walking around to every table saying, hey, make sure you invite your friends to come with you next time. Wow. What they do is they just make sure that the people who actually go to the restaurant have a great experience, and they're going to naturally tell their friends about it and their family about it. And so I think if we did the same thing in the church, we took care of the people inside the walls and gave them a great experience, you know what they're going to do? They're naturally going to talk about what God's doing in them through their church. Right. And then that's going to draw people in who are outside.
Right. I think that's major. I'll say this real fast, and then I know Greg got some stuff that he wants to give you or ask you. Just real fast, shout out to Pastor Joe. That's the Fuse pastor. Yeah. You just said something major, man. You just said if you do things on the inside right, it will draw people. I'm all about this generation, of course, and the next generation. Why aren't we drawing the next generation? Well, it has to do with some things that we're not doing right on the inside. He was just telling me his testimony, and I just wanted to throw it out there because I just thought it was so amazing. I said, man, how did you get to Greenwood, South Carolina? You were from Sumter. He said, man, well, a friend reached out to me and said, hey, man, you got to come join this church. I was like, what? He told you to come join this church? He was like, yeah, man, they're doing things right, and they really love Jesus. That sparked something in him to move from the lower state to the upper state, so the Jesus done inside the right way will draw people on the outside. I just thought that was amazing, man. Yeah, I just thought that was amazing.
That's awesome. When you were talking about like inside the walls and treating those people inside the walls first, I think a big part of that is discipleship. Right. And I'm going to call back to what Pastor Jason said. Pastor Jason's growing his own church in Anderson, and he talks about the discipleship has mostly been done from the stage because they're growing and not done outside of the church building. And he said that's not how it should be done. But sometimes that's how it has to be done, especially in a growing church. He can't disciple everybody. Right. Discipleship, I feel like, takes it to the next level. Discipleship, mentorship, any of that stuff. Will you speak to the importance of that, especially maybe in New Spring?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about that, because it is all about discipleship, but I think the reason why it's so important to take care of the people inside is because then when they go outside, like you specifically talked about the next generation, right? And Joe and I talk about this a lot. The reality is, Joe can't go to every middle school and high school in Greenwood and be at every school lunch and be at every sporting event and talk to every kid and disciple every kid. But man, if we take care of the kids that are inside of our walls, they are sitting at every school lunch. And they are sitting in every sporting event, and they are doing all those things. And then they're naturally going to take that, and they're going to start discipling the people around them. They're going to start shining a light for Jesus to the people around them. And then we're going to see some traction be caught with that. And I think, earlier this year I read through the book of Exodus. And one of the things that in Exodus chapter 18, when Israel's moving, right, great things are happening inside of Israel. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, comes to him and he looks at Moses, and Moses is like bragging about what Israel's doing. Hey, look at me, I'm doing this, I'm judging all these cases. And Jethro looks at him and says, hey, Moses, what you're doing isn't good. And he's like, what are you talking about what I'm doing isn't good? Like, we're seeing all this fruit and all this growth. And he says, hey, if you keep doing all this stuff yourself, you're going to kill yourself, and your people aren't going to get what they need. So then he says, Moses, you need to get some other people alongside of you who can be over smaller groups of people, who can make some decisions. And then that's really when you see Israel start to like expand and grow. Also, you don't have to worry about the idolatry of one man, because they had grown to idolize Moses to the point where in Exodus 32, God calls Moses up to the mountain to get the 10 Commandments for 40 days, and the people go crazy and ask Aaron to make him a golden cow because they didn't know what to do, because the person they idolized for so long was now gone. Right. Like what, the same thing in Acts chapter 6, right? The disciples say, hey, our job's to preach and to pray, but we realize that there's some food distribution to the widows that has to happen. We can't do it, so we need to bring some people alongside of us, and then they're going to go and do that ministry. And I think that's how discipleship has to look. That's good. You have to expand it and let other people carry the weight of the ministry with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here before PJC can say anything, because I'm gonna steal your line. You don't go as far as your dream, you go as far as your team.
That's right.
And
That's exactly
he
right.
says it about every single Tuesday and Thursday, but it's 100% true. You can't to think that like me running a student ministry or either one of y'all running a church can do everything is foolish, especially
and arrogant
and arrogant. Exactly. Yeah. And that's where you sow those seeds of discipleship and they grow. That's really interesting, and like that comes into play in just about every aspect of ministry. There's nobody that can do it all. There's nobody.
I oftentimes say, man, of course, we're pastors and we talk to a lot of pastors, and when we're talking to leaders, especially where we're young leaders, but when we get the opportunity to talk to younger leaders, I often tell them that you cannot have the Messiah complex. It's only been one Jesus Christ. He could do it all. He had a monopoly on it. We don't have a monopoly on the anointing. We don't have a monopoly on people. And if we want to achieve the assignment that God has given to us, we have to partner. I even used as example, what have I been teaching about Jesus and the 12 disciples? Jesus, as much as God as he was, still had to get 12. He still had to duplicate himself. And I believe that's the key in discipleship, is duplicating.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Jesus, that's a perfect example, right? Because he had thousands that he preached to that he didn't have an intimate relationship with. He had hundreds even that heard him teach that he didn't have an intimate relationship. He had 72 that he sent out, and he wasn't that close with them. They heard him teach, and then he sent them out. It was those 12, and then even past that, he had a group of 3 guys that he took everywhere with him. And so he gives us the model of what discipleship should look like.
That's good.
The reality is none of us, and if Jesus only had 12 and 3, how arrogant of us to think we could have any more than that. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And it's such a it's that Messiah complex, and what's happened is that in our churches, our people, because we have the Messiah complex, they have the reverse Messiah complex where they put us up on this pedestal, and that's when you see, pastors fall, and all of a sudden everybody leaves the church and quits going to church because they put this pastor on a pedestal that he was never meant to be on in the first place.
No doubt about it. Because what I've done. Or we worked to do, because we have a ministry where we transitioned. And we kind of look at the Joshua Moses narrative. We talk about it all the time. My mom and dad, they're like Moses. They're iconic. They did funerals, they christened the babies, they did everything. And I'm kind of like Joshua moving in. But Joshua had a different style of leadership than Moses. Moses, trying to do everything, allowed his emotions to get in the way. We don't have to get in the whole story. But what we teach and what we've been preaching from our leadership is that we don't want to build a church off of personality. We have to build the church off of a principle. The principles of Jesus Christ. And that's one thing that I tell the people, don't look at me, look at Jesus. And I believe that's where the churches went wrong in some areas, where they built it off of this personality instead of building it off the principles of Jesus.
Absolutely. I've referenced this a ton in the past couple of podcasts, but Francis Chan's book, Letters to the Church. That's we just summarized exactly what he talks about.
Phenomenal book.
Phenomenal book. I'm only 80 pages in, but it's still awesome. I've been stuck on 80 pages for the last year because I can't sit down and read it. But, I mean, he talks about the reasons he stepped away from his church, and that's exactly what he says. A line that sticks out to me is he says that we worship a God that gave us a living word, but then we leave churches because a pastor can't make the word come to life. That's crazy.
That's good.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something different right there.
You know, even our American culture is like this consumeristic culture. I mean, you know, like, I'm leaving this church because I wasn't being fed.
Right.
Well, open your Bible and feed
Right,
yourself.
right,
like you, I
right,
mean,
right,
you know what I'm saying?
right,
Like, I mean, it's unbelievable. This just, hey, I'm gonna sit back and get whatever they give me, and if I'm not happy, if something happens, I'm out of here. I'm going to the next place.
Right.
And it's created this competition against churches. It's taken away from unity, and man, you know, yeah, and we got to stop our people so that doesn't happen.
That's a whole nother piece, man. That is. I think that whole piece. We can talk about that for forever, right? So let's kind of bring it back around, okay? You spoke today on unity because I want them to hear a little bit about that unity piece, man, because I thought it was next level. You gave an amazing story about when you were at Clemson, when you were a manager, how you got disrespected by this other manager. I want you to dive into that unity piece, how we bring unity by biting the bullet sometimes, you know, here it is, simply humbling ourselves. Can you just dive into that a little bit?
Maybe recap that story for us.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That was a great illustration.
Yeah. So when I was at Clemson, I was a manager for the basketball team under Oliver Purnell, and we were playing Duke. Duke came to Little John. And the reality is, you know, Duke basketball is, I mean, it's iconic. It is. Coach K is, you know, holier than that, right? Like, and so, you know, we're Clemson, so our colors are purple and orange, you know, and so we have purple and orange towels. It's just what we did. And so the Duke manager walks up to me carrying the towels that I just put in their locker room, and he just drops them down at my feet, looks me in the eyes, and said, "Hey, we're Duke basketball. We're not using those." Wow. And so, what do you mean you're not using those? That's all we got. We're and he was like, "I'm telling you, we're Duke basketball. We're not going to use those."
Wow.
And in that moment, you know, I wanted to hit him. I wanted to say things to him. I wanted to say, "Well, hey, then dry off with paper towels for all I care." Like, you know. But in that moment, I knew that wasn't the right thing to do. Right. I knew that, you know, that guy. I did not want to love him, but I went to the school bookstore, bought a bunch of white towels, took it back to them. And said, all right, here, I sacrificed my own money for this, because Coach Purnell surely wouldn't have given me money for it. And I sacrificed my own money to do it because I knew that was the way, to treat another human being. And I think, you know, the story that I talked about in Scripture is the story of the Good Samaritan. And we see a man who's willing to sacrifice,
that's good,
to humble himself, to put another person before himself, and even a person he wasn't supposed to love or care for. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's so easy. I mean, Jesus said, how easy is it to love somebody who's going to love you back? Mm-hmm. Right? The mark of a believer, though, is loving somebody we're not supposed to love. Loving somebody who is even our enemy.
That's good.
At times.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah, that's really good. Hey, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for coming on, as always. So thank you for coming to Erskine and speaking to the students, because that was awesome. Obviously, I always thank you for being here.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Student and the Teacher podcast, right here on the Green Room. Make sure you stick around, subscribe, share it with a friend. We're coming out with different stuff every week. I say this, I feel like a broken record because I've said it so much. But we are. We're coming out with a ton of stuff. We're trying to pour into the viewers, pour into our community around us, and everything in that sense. So thank you for tuning in. We will catch you on the next one. See you later.
Peace.